I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about regenerative healthcare. I know that's something really important to you and what Rodale is doing. And if you could just talk about that and the link that you guys are finding between, how we grow in living soil and how that's really impacting our actual health.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start with the mission of Rodale Institute, which is something that was authored over 75 years ago and still holds true today. So our founder, J.I. Rodale, in May of 1942, actually said that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. Mm-hmm. That was his thesis that still holds. We hold that as our guiding principles today. That's the mission of Rodale Institute. It's connecting soil health with human health. Mm-hmm. And we believe that soil health and human health are inextricably linked, that we as farmers, our job is not to produce food per se, but that really we need to begin to rethink our jobs as growing healthy people.
Yep.
And that, as we look out at the healthcare landscape and where we are as a society here in 2021, we are beginning to see how fundamentally broken not only our agricultural systems are, and how far away we've marched from that original idea that J.I. Rodale had, mm-hmm. but also how concurrent and parallel the path of our healthcare system has been on. We've moved from seeing patients as biological systems to seeing them as a symptom, and what pills can I give them to treat the symptom. Yes. And really, I think that's what's happened with our agricultural system too. We've, in the name of science and chemistry, we've developed some really, really powerful technologies mm-hmm. that treat symptoms on farms, whether it's a pest or a fertility issue or right. a weed. There's a chemical for that. And when we look at to our healthcare system, and I've been a victim of this mm-hmm. idea that Jeff, you are a symptom. You're experiencing symptoms, and let's try prescribing medicine to treat those symptoms, only to find the biological system that I am fall further and further apart.
Yeah.
And it's when we begin to look at healthcare through this lens of regenerative healthcare. Functional medicine does this really well, where we're beginning to see doctors reclaim their patients as systems, as biological systems that need to be farmed back to health through foundational approaches.
And when you say regenerative healthcare and functional medicine, are those kind of one and the same, or are there differences between those two?
I don't think it would be fair for Rodale Institute to borrow the name functional medicine, because there's some great organizations out there that are leading that effort around functional medicine. Mm-hmm. I think Rodale Institute has sort of begun to use this idea of regenerative healthcare that actually links agriculture with human health outcomes. This is a whole new frontier. And we believe that we're living at a time in human history where we need to begin to form a conversation between doctors and farmers. And we did that through the Power of the Plate, which is a white paper that Rodale Institute released last year. That whole idea came out of a meeting that happened almost 3 years ago now, where we got leading doctors and farmers to sit around a table, and soil scientists, and we began to architect this idea of the power of the plate and a case for regenerative organic agriculture to improve human health. So that was sort of the impetus for this idea of regenerative healthcare.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And I think what's interesting too is there are studies, and I'm sure you guys, I'm curious if you can talk about that a bit, about just I like to talk about this, the nutrient depletion, like the people need to kind of understand, when you think about our food supply chain and it's, what actually happens. And this is a case for really growing food, going local to the farmers, but also growing food yourself, in terms of what's actually happening to the nutrient deficiency, not just how you grow it, but time to harvest to your plate. Have you guys done any studies around that, or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've coined a phrase here at Rodale Institute called hidden hunger. It's the idea that most of the human population is walking around today, well fed, but undernourished. There's no shortage of food, certainly in this country. Right. Yet our soils are becoming more and more depleted and devoid of key nutrients and micronutrients that are pivotal for human health outcomes. And several years ago, about 5 years ago now, Rodale Institute started the first study of its kind in the world called the Vegetable Systems Trial. And this is will be a long running trial side-by-side comparison of vegetable crops grown in regenerative and organic soils
Okay.
managed using those kinds of farming practices directly next to soils and plots of land that are being managed in a chemical conventional way. And so this study is the first study in the world that sets out to answer the question, is organic food truly worth it? Is it truly more nutrient dense? Is it truly more nutritious? Is it healthier for you? No one's ever set out to answer that question through science until now. And so we're feeling very excited about this one.
That is so important, because I just personally looking for evidence of that, because it seems so obvious, right? I mean, it's such an obvious thing that of course your food would be healthier, but interesting that you guys are going after the science. Do you guys have any findings so far? I mean, it sounds like you started that about 4 years ago. Is there
preliminary findings? Yeah, you can
Uh-huh.
you can go deep on this if your audience is curious to learn more about the we call it VST. On Rodale's website, under our science tab, there's a link to the vegetable systems trial that'll take you into some of the published peer-reviewed literature. Anecdotally, I could say, yeah, it's been astonishing to see in such a short amount of time stark differences in the nutrient quality of the food grown in an organic way versus that grown in a chemical conventional approach. So early data is suggesting that there are stark differences between the quality of the food coming out of both systems.
Right. And this, of course, probably is linking to, the diabetes epidemic in our country, rise of autoimmune. There's a lot of issues. I mean, there's something to be said, right? I love that term, hidden hunger, because there's something to be said about, I'm eating salads, but yet I'm not filling up. Why is that? And it's like, well, you're probably, you're the nutrient density is probably not quite there. I mean, but right. It's awesome. You guys are grabbing some scientific evidence, because sometimes when I'm out there talking to people, I will get, well, what is the data? What does that look like? And I think that will really help consumers as a whole if they really can start to see that and understand that. So let's talk real quick about regenerative. One of the things we do at Planet Places, of course, is we help people in a kind of in a home environment. How do you grow food in living soil in small containers? And so whether we're doing that on vertical systems we have or in containers. And I'm so curious about how, what can they be doing to, if they're not doing a raised bed, what can they be doing to regenerate if they're starting out with living soil? And of course, they're growing food. And so how can we think about that? What can consumers do to really make sure that they're doing what they...
Yeah, I think about this in terms of degrees of separation and degrees of reconnection.
Yeah.
We've seen this dramatic divorce from agriculture in this country, in particular. During the World War II years, it's my understanding that some 45% of all the produce consumed in this country came from our own backyards. You remember the Victory Garden movement?
Yeah, the Victory Garden, of course. Yes.
Yeah, and it was so wildly successful in terms of what it set out to do. And I think many Americans embraced this idea of growing our own food, and they felt empowered around that, and they were. Mm-hmm. And some 75 years later, now 17%, almost 20% of all the food on shelves in the grocery store comes from other countries.
Wow.
So we've been on like this 75-year journey away from connection to source. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the pandemic that we're all living through right now has been this great invitation to reconnect. The National Gardening Association reported that last year during the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic, perhaps some 22 million new gardens were planted in the United States. Direct farm sales, where consumers were driving up to the farm gate and getting to know a farmer in their community and buying food from the farmer, increased 420% year over year. There was also new businesses that formed where farmers created, instead of being able to deliver to restaurants, they needed to quickly pivot. And so they created their own supply chain where they were doing door-to-door delivery and taking food to people's homes. And so we've seen this dramatic reordering of the supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're living at a moment in human history where it's like this great invitation for all of us to reconnect. And I think of it in terms of degrees of reconnection, starting with what can I grow in my own backyard? If you have soil, if you rent a home or an apartment, that has land that you can grow food, I believe it's actually your responsibility to grow food. Where I live in Pennsylvania, I can be growing food in my own backyard about 8 months a year.
That's amazing since you're in Pennsylvania. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I ate my last salad out of my garden the week before Christmas last year.
Yeah.
And so, and so I think that it's our responsibility, and not just a responsibility. I don't want people to think of it in terms of a burden. It's not a burden, it's a privilege, and it's a joy to reconnect with nature, to put seeds into the soil and watch them grow, and then to be able to eat something, consume something that you've grown. It changes you on a cellular, spiritual level. If you can't do that, all of us have the opportunity to get to know a farmer in our community. There are most communities around the United States have local farmers markets where farmers from the community growing food in healthy soil, they need markets, they need access to consumers, and we need to support them. And by doing that, we can actually play a role in re-architecting the supply chain. We can create localized food economies. We can change the very fabric of our community by supporting farmers. Then we don't need to plow our farm fields under to put another Amazon warehouse up.
Right.
And then, and if you can't, and then another degree of connection is we can all compost. I think it's my understanding that some 40% of all of the waste in landfills could be diverted to our soils by composting.
40%.
That's what I'm told. 40% of all the waste in a landfill could be composted and returned to the soil to nourish us and to nourish the soil. And so composting, growing something, getting to know a farmer, these are fundamental things that can change our own human and planetary health.
I love that. Yeah. And it's interesting. You're absolutely right. Like once you start growing food, it really, we see this in our customers. Because we're going after people that really haven't done this before, right? And so they become so aware of all of a sudden where my food does come from, and it starts really impacting how they look at the conventional, and just looking at the grocery store, when they look at where is all this food coming from, and what can I grow myself? So that's super important. And I think also too, starting out with healthy soil, we give people soil to start out with, living soil, and then teaching them, what are worms? What are worms? What are worm castings? These are not gross things. These are very important to the biology of the soil. So that's wonderful. And I know we've got just a few minutes more. Do you want to talk about, I know Rodale does a lot of education around this. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of what are some of just for people to get involved and to learn more.
Yeah. So right from Rodale Institute's website, if you click on the education tab, you're going to be led to our new online education platform. We are now offering global consumer-focused education that teaches fundamentals of the organic way of life. Things like composting workshops, organic gardening classes, hobby beekeeping, classes about soil health, orcharding, and on and on and on. We are and will continue to build out a slate of curriculum and classes that individual consumers can take for a very nominal fee. And I really, really encourage you all to consider taking a class, coming to visit. We offer many workshops in person here on our farm from spring through fall. And I invite you into our educational platforms.
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, that's such an important part of it. So the more people know, the better it's going to be. So great.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, is there I'm also, if you don't mind me going kind of a little personal, I'm just interested because I kind of have a similar story with the functional health and the regenerative health. And one thing that I learned about, kind of, I had health issues where I literally had to stop working. And I had to work, I couldn't really be commuting. It was an issue where it's like, I was, I had to stop and take care. Your body tells you, right? And
the body knows the score.
I know the score. And I was thinking I was being healthy. I was eating my salads and I was doing things. I exercised all the time. And I had a friend that was, definitely a naturopath, nutritionist, functional medicine. And she really taught me a lot about like the biome, right? The gut biome and leafy greens. and having to bring, you know, kind of, you need to kind of, you got to get vegetables, more vegetables and the right vegetables into your system. And it's amazing because now that I'm growing my own leafy greens, you know, in living soil, you know, even my kids, this is what is phenomenal. This is an important message, I think, for people too, is, you know, when you grow your food, and, you know, I grow it vertically. So it's sort of interesting, right? It's like, what is that growing? And so my kids, I've got 3 boys, and, you know, and 2 of them, you know, the whole vegetable thing was not a big thing. And when they saw that, they're like, well, what is that, Mom? And they literally, I mean, first off, it tastes better. It just absolutely nutrient dense, healthy leafy greens. They taste good. Kale does not taste like the kale you buy in the grocery store. And they started, I mean, they now go outside every day and they harvest from the wall and they're putting it in their sandwiches and their scrambled eggs. So it's really impactful. So I'm curious, like when you were having to kind of rebuild and, you know, your health and such, was there certain avenues that you had to go with that?
Yeah. My mom had 3 boys, by the way.
Did she? Yeah.
Yeah. All 2 years apart too. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle. Okay. I'm the consummate middle child. My wife will tell you. Yeah. Yeah. So I had a health collapse. It sounds like you did too. But in the years 2015 and 16, during that time period, I had been moving along in my life, thinking I was a healthy guy. I think I was. I exercised. I ate organic food. I was physically fit. But one day fell flat on my face, ill, and didn't get better. And it was a 4, 5, 6 month journey. Had to go on medical leave, bed rest.
Oh wow!
And 6 doctors and $50,000 of out-of-pocket medical costs and 0 answers. No one could tell me. No one could explain to me what caused my health collapse. And talk about a frightening feeling for a 36-year-old guy at the time. Ultimately, a dear friend of mine suggested that I find my way to a functional medicine doctor, a doctor that practices something called functional medicine. And lo and behold, one of the leading functional medical doctors on the East Coast happened to be located 3.5 miles from the home I was living in at the time, and got an appointment with him. And I remember my first visit was like 2 hours, and he did a bunch of diagnostics, ordered a bunch of blood work, found out that I had chronic Lyme disease that went undiagnosed, and just destroyed me, destroyed my microbiome, destroyed my body. Chronic arthritis, fevers, hallucinations. I had every symptom you can imagine, dysbiosis. And he basically said, you know, Jeff, at this point, okay, we know what's wrong. We know what caused the health collapse. That's a bonus. The bad news is there's not a pill that I can't prescribe a pill that's going to make you better. He goes, you know, he said to me, I'll never forget this. He kind of looked me in the eye and said, you understand agriculture, right? And I said, sure, of course, in light of the work I do. He goes, well, we're going to farm your body back to health, starting at like the soil level. And we, over the course of, it took about two years to fully recover, but we used everything but pharmaceutical treatment. We used diet, mindfulness, meditation, breath work, body work, acupuncture, ozone therapy, IV therapy, vitamins, herbs. Wow. Reiki. I mean, you name it, we did it. And we treated my body as a biological system and a spiritual system. And through that, you know, we brought me back to full health. I would say that in all of that, food was foundational to my healing. A diet that was completely absent of processed food, dairy, gluten. And I ate plants, healthy fats, pasture-raised meat and eggs, and cold water fish, no sugar. And little by little, lots of fermented foods. Yep. Lots of clean water. And that just slowly brought me back to full health.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think also what's so interesting too is the attention on kind of mindfulness too, right? Because it's, you know, I think you were obviously rebuilding your microbiome, sounds like.
Yeah.
And I think the meditation and a stress piece, like it's also the environment that, you know, you've got your healthy food going through you, but it's the environment that you're putting that food into, you know.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It was a full system that needed to be rebooted.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. That's a great way to finish this talk because it kind of brings it all together in terms of what it is that you had to do to bring yourself back to health, and the connection between, growing food, regenerative, we didn't even touch, which we don't even have time, but we'll have to do that a different time. The climate impact that regenerative.
Well, then good. All the more reason to do another conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So wonderful talking to you, Jeff.
Yeah, real honor. Christy, thank you for having me on today. Thank you for the great work you're doing in the world.
Yep.
And we're totally behind you at Rodale. Healthy soil equals healthy people. So
absolutely,
you're a part of the movement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Take care.
Have
Jeff.
a great day.
Bye-bye.